Okay, let's look at the article Decentralized Justice, State-of-the-Art, Recurring Criticism, and Next Generation Research Topic. So, uh, this is an interesting article because it's about alternative dispute resolutions. And if you think about it, the Constitutional Committee in the SIP 1694 is sort of a dispute mechanism, because what they are going to do is basically look at governance proposals and judge if they are constitutional or not. Some will be done through smart contracts, maybe. Some will be done directly by the CC through some form of voting. And that's actually a dispute, because they are saying this governance action is not valid because it's unconstitutional. They are disputing the validity of a governance action. Or at least you can frame it that way, as being a dispute mechanism. So we are already starting to develop something like this on Cardano. So this is a fantastic article to look at. I do think there are some problems in this article, and they do touch upon all of them. So it's an excellent article. But I would like to get them off my chest in the beginning, because I think the proposed system is not that ideal. But I really like that they have acknowledged those problems and that they are also striving for it. So, and what you say, perfection is the enemy of good. And so I truly respect them for having made something that's actually a working product. So many of these researchers are working on the Kleros cooperative, and it has done many successful dispute resolutions. Even one that was then accepted in a court in Mexico, and because both parties agreed and none disputed it, and the court acknowledged it and made a court order to comply with it. So that's pretty cool. But with that said, let me get some of the criticism off my chest. So the main theme here is that decentralized justice is going to happen through tokenomics and aligning incentives through those economics, basically game theory, much like we have blocks produced on Cardano. So there's some problems with that. The first one is in saying that it's fully randomized, because you can have 50% of the tokens bought by one actor, and their likelihood of being selected for jury duty will then be 50% or more. It's a weighted randomization. So that's already our problem. The other problem is because the identities are not known in the current system, you don't have any form of identity disclosure, then it will not align well with international treaties, because where you are located, the parties involved matters, but also the jury matters where they are located. Um, because of what, and of course you have to protect the jury, so you need some form of zero knowledge proof disclosure, but it's entirely possible. So I feel the framework they have there is great, but it can and maybe will evolve in the future as well. And they even discuss a lot about zero knowledge proofs as well. So they clearly also look into and acknowledge that. And yeah, the identity problem they also acknowledge very well. So it's an excellent article. But I'm saying that if we do something similar for Cardano, we should try to build upon what's already there and try to make it even better. But yeah, let's get into it. So it starts with this natural conclusion that due to having now near zero communication costs, near zero transaction cost through blockchain and internet, then you have a new form of disputes due to online communities involved in activity, economic activity. This is absolutely right. And the interesting part is it now involves anonymous or pseudo-anonymous agents hailing from different legal jurisdictions. So the question then, and they discussed it later in the article, is like, do we then need a new form of transnational agreement? And they also very well point out, for example, the New York Convention, I guess it's a treaty on dispute resolution, if I remember correctly. It's or arbitration, I guess. It's old from 1958, and it's not really fitted to the situation we have now with these blockchains with online communities involving anonymous and pseudonymous agents hailing from different legal jurisdictions. But for me, You could try to adapt this to the old framework, and you could do that with entity, or you could go the way of some form of new transnational agreement system. And I think it would be wise for Garano to think about both and to be open for the future. Uh, Whatever wind the politicians blow. So that's my main takeaway on that. But yeah, so one of these emerging dispute resolution frameworks is dubbed decentralized justice, and they show the Kleros protocol. It's an example of this, and it already had at the time of writing the article 1,500 disputes, and they give examples of contracts that needs to have some form of dispute, like when you're talking about qualitative terms, like what's the quality, I mean, and if you follow the specifications, like things that you can't like always measure in exact numbers, but it's like more subjective and more of a qualitative data. um, and then you can't have contracts that have everything, and this is known from the ancient ages, like that goes for laws, that goes for contracts. Hammurabi tried this back in the days. He tried to write everything in stone tables for all the different laws, and you just cannot. There will always be unforeseen situations. So what you do is you create legal frameworks that are generalized and talks about values and intent and all these things that more becomes like guiding lights or northern stars for how to interpret the result. Uh, and that's why you need to have dispute resolution systems. You need to have someone who does the interpretation of the contract and what was the intent of the contract and so on. And yeah, again, this is not something new from history. There are many examples of all of this. So mm, the, the theory behind it is based upon foundations from the old ages, but is used in modern technology. Um, and here they talk about how this works in the Kleros protocol, because it's the most widely adopted. But again, randomly chosen, I would say weighted randomly chosen, because there's a weight to it depending on your token stake. So that's a problem for me. That's why the no smiley face for me. Um, and it doesn't require you expertise or identity. And I get the point, and their point is that this is a new type of dispute resolution that's more based on economic incentives than, say, the social value or duty you feel as a juror. So I get all of that, but I'm just saying this is heavily is to be abused and full of attack vectors, and it's a bit careful road you need to take to walk that path. But I acknowledge they really think about all of these things, so it's a clever article for sure. I'm just not sure I like how they ended with it, that meta. And for example, this they use the carrot and stick approach. If the vote is anonymous, then all get the arbitration fee. If it's split decision, dissenting jurors are not paid and also lose their staked token. And for me, that's what the fuck. And like for example, what happens then is I probably could run some statistic on this to validate my thesis here. But what I predict will happen is you will a lot more anonymous votes, statistically more, probably statistically significant more than you would in a regular jury. You would likely have a more higher ratio of same votes than no votes. Basically, you are removing the human element of it. Like you are the dissenting voice is usually giving you the nuances of a court case, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, because every case builds upon the previous case. This is also part of the human element of law. So for me, this is like going in a very wrong path. It's aligning only with the economic incentives and creating scenarios where you as a jury try not to think of what's the right thing to vote, but what is the probable thing that the others will vote. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be in. You don't want jurors to be incentivized to think like that. So, but all of these things are possible to fix. You can have economic incentives, but also incentivize dissenting voices. So I don't think it's unsolvable, but I think they choose a system that I question, and I'm aware of the social gaming theory that's supposed to be aligning this, but it doesn't work like that. It's not only about the economic incentives when it comes to in that particular case. It's also about how one case builds upon others and makes case law. So it just doesn't work in my opinion. And I have suggested a few things you can check statistically wise to check my thesis as well. Anyway, and jurors who dissent from the majority on average experience an economic loss. So what you will get is like over time natural selection where people will agree more and more. That's what you get. You don't necessarily get the best jurors. What you will get is a system where you will not have a natural selection to agree more and more. That's what you get with a system like that. But that's just my opinion, and I think you will get the tyranny of the commons with such a system. But I am sorry for having such a strong opinion on that. I really appreciate the research, and there's so much value in this being done. And again, perfection is the enemy of good, so it's really cool to see this system. But I would definitely have looked into that if there was something I would change. Uh, yeah, I'm just noting not fully randomized here. Uh, yeah, and you're incentivized to not dissent. So yeah, I'm not sure that's fair. But and again, fairness, it's a very vague concept. But what is fair? But what you want is, for example, a non-partial jury. And the thing is, if you're thinking about what other jury members are planning to vote, then you are not non-partial anymore. So yeah. Um, yeah, and for having these things, you build trust by, or legitimacy, I guess, by having a decentralized autonomous organization owning it, and a mechanism designed based on cryptonomics, so it's transparent, and then a generator perception of fairness by it. This rewards being distributed on how you act. But again, I find this problematic. Um, and yeah, this formula ensures that users behave honestly and ethically, and on average be rewarded economically. And again, I disagree because they will hesitate to vote in a way that's dissenting to what they think others will vote. That's their financial incentives. And there are many times in a dispute that dissenting voice is very valuable for the future case law. So I don't think this is correct. Um, and yeah, I guess all of this we covered. I talked about fairness, but this is true. Like I think this is correct. Like there's a formal method of procedural fairness, and yeah, it's procedurally fair. But again, that's just one measurement of fairness, and you could find other measurements that it's not fair. And I just pointed out a few reasons why. And but they also like more generalized look at this, like how should the what's the different approach to dispute resolutions, and what type of challenges do decentralized justice systems face. This is gold and very valuable to know, like technical, marketing, legal, and moral. And yeah, it's I call this, for example, like the harmonization problem, like the technical, like you need to harmonize law and code. The market, it's uh, is it a winner takes all legal system where the one that's most popular wins, and then it becomes cheaper and scale of efficiency? They talk about this later. The legal side of it, how does it fit with the current legal systems? Do we need its own legal system? Can it adapt to it? Is there a middle ground between those two extremes? Or where it's not at all living side by side but on its own, or living side by side, or a mix of the both. Like you can see all of these models, and they discuss all of this and the morality of it. And I will again question the morality when it's only economic incentives. And to be fair, they do discuss this quite at length at the end of the article of non-economical reasons about jury duty. So they do think about this for sure. Um, and yeah, I like this figure, and sweet spot of adoption is both technical, efficient, and secure, viable in the market, complies with legal requirements, is perceived as ethical by the community. So that's the goal for this decentralized dispute mechanisms. And I think mostly without identity, this is where you will fall in many cases currently. So that needs to be solved, and the rest, I believe, are all solvable. So all of this is solvable, and it's possible to be in that sweet spot. Um, and then they discuss like security assumptions, and as with any water system, needs to be attack resistance without requiring central intervention. They discuss one interesting thing where bribery is, and they have a special type of bribery because of this mechanism where winner takes it all. I don't know the theory behind this P epsilon attack. Have not read this, but they describe it here. The attacker offers to bribe participant if they vote for a malicious outcome, contingent on said malicious outcome losing the vote. Um, yeah. Um, Let me just remember my thoughts about that. Yeah, so basically they get a free attack, because if they bribe them to vote in that way, and that way votes, it costs them way less because they will also vote the same way. And when winner takes it all, then those tokens are given to that outcome. So again, it's like quite a dangerous road to take. And for me, this is yet another reason for also incentivizing dissenting voices. Um, and they also acknowledge here this dispro- disproportionate voting weight is due to limitation of the identity system in blockchains, and it's just basically a problem of Sybil attack in general. So the solution is probably verifiable credentials issued by DIDs. Yeah. Hello.